Well, hello.
Hello.
Good morning. We are so excited. Almost tears. It's been 3 years, right? And it's been 3 disrupted years. But we're back. So 2022, we have the best lineup that we've ever had. And you're lucky to have scored a chair. We've wheeled in a few more if more people show up. But it's so good to see a full house. And we're so excited to have you at Disrupt Sydney 2022. The last one was 2019. Before I tell you a little bit about the journey, because the journey has a lot to do with disruption and why we are all here and why we keep doing this, I want to welcome everyone, and I want to acknowledge on behalf of the University of Sydney that we come together on the beautiful Aboriginal land of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, a land that unites us and that has always been a place of learning and knowledge exchange, which we're merely continuing today. So I want to acknowledge the traditional owners of Australia and recognize their continuing connection to land, water, and also culture. As we share our knowledge here today, maybe also pay respect to the knowledge embedded forever within the Aboriginal custodianship of country. I think that's important, and the way in which this event evolved, the way in which this event has become what it is over the years is a true sort of testimony to the idea of a modern university as a place of exchange, which I think is also very much how the traditional owners of this land would have conceived of a place of exchange. So I want to give you a quick introduction. And so Sandra Peter here, who I work with on The Future This Week, our podcast, she said, I should tell the origin story. I was like, I don't know. So we started this because it seemed like a good idea at the time. And I'm like, what am I going to say, right? And I'm like, what everyone would do these days. I'm like, okay, I asked GPT-3. So you know what GPT-3 is? It's like a text completion AI. It's this massive algorithm that has been trained on the body of knowledge that is the internet. You give it a prompt, and it will just give you a text. It completes the text. It divines statistically what would make sense to come next. Right? Here's what it said. I gave it, I gave it, we created the Disrupt Sydney conference because. And then the AI said, there was a need for a conference that focused on digital disruption and innovation in Australia. There are plenty of conferences that focus on startups and entrepreneurship, but not many that focus specifically on digital disruption. We wanted to create a space for people that learn about the latest trends in digital disruption and innovation and to network with like-minded individuals. We also wanted to showcase some of the best and brightest minds in the field and to give attendees the opportunity to learn from their experiences. Well, that sounds very corporate. That's not what happened. I wish I could say, oh, we had this grand vision. We're going to have this conference, and we're going to set up a team, and we're going to create a conference, and we do this. That's not how it happened. The way it happened was I came to Australia, and I was struck by the way in which industry and academia, also the arts, were these separate spaces. And everyone was talking about how do we sort of bridge those spaces. And I'm like, I'm having coffee with these interesting people every day, and I don't care where they're from, but they're really cool people, and we're learning a lot. There's all these technologies emerging. We need to make sense of this. Enterprise social networking at the time, I was doing research with Riemer. And at some point I said, oh, look, there's too many conversations that I've been having. Let's bring them all into the same room. A couple of people actually here, Shana Wiblin, who was at USIT, she's now at Wollongong, and Scott Ward, I think, is one of the only people in the room. Scott, where are you? Yeah, Scott is one of the members of the first hour. He's not an academic, right? And we didn't care. So we brought together a group of people who came together once a month, and we had all these really interesting chats. But we wanted to sort of invite more people, and we said, okay, let's do a conference or something. Like it was an experiment. So in September 2013, we created this event, and we called it Disrupt Sydney. Seemed like a good idea at the time. By the way, that term disrupt turns out to be actually quite fitting because we're no longer into digital disruption and this idea of the startup disrupting the industry and whatever. That was one notion of disruption. But it's much more about new ways of thinking these days. And so in 2013, by the way, I also asked Dolly, this image, divining AI, what DISRUPT.SYDNEY would look like. This is what it came up with. Looks a bit like your stock standard tech conference. Is not what this is, right? So it's slightly different. So in 2013, we had Adam Pisoni opened the event as the co-founder of Riemer, now owned by Microsoft. And it was all about how do we make organizations more responsive, right? Remember, disruption was a buzzword. No one really knew what it was. Everyone had different notions over the years. We never really figured out what it meant. But we also always had the idea that it is about bringing lots of people together to think differently. Yeah, also this boy gave a talk there. Yeah, I know, it's been a while. So over the years, new questions emerged that we engaged with. I'm not going to bore you with all the details of the talks, although they were amazing, right? Amazing talks. All the videos are on the web, by the way, if you want to really indulge and binge. But we had Maya Dello, who talked about how they used Minecraft in school. We had Baby X, one of the first public demonstrations of digital humans, these things that pop up everywhere these days. Mark Sager came out from Auckland for that. So how can we make sense of new tech emerging all around us? So there's always been a tech angle to disruption. But from the first day, we said, this is not a tech conference because it's not about tech per se. It's always about people. So how do we bring everyone along on the journey has always been a big question. So how are we being inclusive? How do we design a world around us that is actually mindful of the people? How do we harness storytelling for innovation? We had Dr. Karl, one of the best storytellers at the University of Sydney, a very colorful person. We had one of the first blockchain panels in the country at that time, at that conference. So we always were about inviting people that are interesting, that we wanted to hear from, that are somewhat different and for sure disruptive. And from day one, we also had this idea that art should be part of this. So 2017, those of you who were here will remember Lindsay Pollack playing tunes on a carrot and on a garden chair, on a set of garden hoses, setting up here. So he basically built instruments in front of us. Superb. Right? So from day one, we had art as part of DISRUPT.SYDNEY. We have a DJ, Ming Darcy, today, and we have Peter Moxham, who will create amazing AI art for us throughout the event using, I think, Midjourney today, yes? Dolly, Midjourney, Stable Diffusion, all these big AI models that we can now use to, create never seen before pictures. So we will showcase a few. How do we deal with organizational stupidity? That was a fun year. The question of how can we actually make large organizations innovate? If anyone solves that problem, let me know. We're currently doing that inside the university, so I'm desperate to hear about ideas. But that was a good question to ask. How do we rethink success in a world that is changing so fast? So what are the kind of things that we need to pay attention to? We had Rob Hackett, who's disrupting safety in the operating theater. Amazing talk. And then the biggest disruption ever happened, right? Somewhat digital, but we decided very early on, we're not going to run DISRUPT.SYDNEY as an online event because you cannot capture what happens when we come together in this room and in the breakout rooms for the workshops in the afternoon. So it's been 2 years, 3 really, but 2 years in which we have not done Disrupt because we were disrupted. But today we're here. And Disruption or DISRUPT.SYDNEY is a conference that includes all of you. So we want to hear from you. Bring questions. We have time for questions for the keynotes, but there's ample opportunity to talk to each other in the breaks, to network, and then to take your ideas into the workshops in the afternoon. Now, it is my absolute pleasure to introduce to you our first speaker.